It was a September morning on the winding coastal roads above Monaco. The sun shimmered on the Mediterranean, the air heavy with heat. A pale green rover glided along the corniche, carrying a princess who had once ruled Hollywood. Moments later, everything changed. The car left the road and tumbled down the hillside, a flash of metal, a cloud of dust, and then silence. Grace Kelly, the silver-screen goddess-turned-royal princess, was gone. But her story, her beauty, her choices, her contradictions, continues to haunt the world she left behind. This is the story of Grace Kelly, the woman who lived two fairy tales and paid the price for both. Grace Patricia Kelly was born on November 12, 1929, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. The world she entered was one of privilege and expectation. Her father, John B. Kelly Sr., was a self-made millionaire and three-time Olympic gold medalist in rowing, a man of ambition, charisma, and pride. Her mother, Margaret Major Kelly, had been a model and physical education instructor. Strict, elegant, and determined to mold her children into perfection. Grace was the third of four children, quiet and imaginative, in a house full of extroverts. Where her siblings thrived in competition, she found refuge in books, daydreams, and the arts. She would stand before the mirror, speaking lines she'd memorized from plays, and in those stolen moments, she could be anyone she wanted, a queen, a pauper, a dreamer. At the elite Stevens School for Girls, teachers described her as poised yet distant, a child with a private light burning behind the eyes. When her father scoffed at her ambition to act, calling it a slim cut above street walking, Grace simply smiled. She had inherited his determination, but none of his bluster. After high school, she applied to the American Academy of Dramatic Arts in New York. She was rejected once, then tried again, and was accepted. She worked part-time as a model, appearing in advertisements for Old Gold cigarettes and department store catalogs. At night, she studied lines under dim lights in her small Manhattan apartment, listening to the hum of taxis and dreaming of stages she hadn't yet seen. In the early 1950s, Hollywood was in flux. The war was over. Television was rising. Studios searched for a new kind of star, one who could embody both purity and mystery. Grace Kelly arrived like a whisper from another world. Her film debut, 14 Hours, 1951, barely hinted at what was to come. But it was enough for Gary Cooper to take notice. He recommended her to play his wife in High Noon, a modest role that caught the camera's affection in a way few ever could. Hollywood was enchanted. Her porcelain beauty, her restrained gestures, and that measured, lilting voice. She seemed less an actress than a portrait that had stepped into motion. Director John Ford cast her opposite Clark Gable and Ava Gardner in Mogambo. On set, under the African sun, her quiet discipline stood out among tempestuous stars. Ford later said, "Grace had the strength of a nun and the look of a saint until a camera rolled. Then she was pure fire. By 1953, she had caught the eye of Alfred Hitchcock, the master of controlled obsession. He called her the paradox I'd been waiting for, the volcano under the snow. Under his direction, Grace bloomed. In Dial M for Murder, Rear Window, and To Catch a Thief, she perfected the Hitchcockian ideal. Cool, elegant, yet simmering with danger. She could hold the screen without raising her voice, seduce without moving a muscle. Her partnership with James Stewart in Rear Window remains one of cinema's most enduring romances, a dance of curiosity, suspense, and longing. By 1954, Grace Kelly was more than famous. She was cinema incarnate, the embodiment of grace, refinement, and self-possession. That same year, she won the Academy Award for Best Actress for The Country Girl, shattering her own pristine image by playing a weary, disillusioned wife. At just 26, she had conquered Hollywood. But the fairy tale had another chapter waiting. The year was 1955. Cannes sparkled under the Riviera sun, a carnival of glamour, cameras, and ambition. Grace Kelly arrived as America's most beloved actress, promoting The Country Girl. Across town, a young ruler, Prince Rainier III of Monaco, was searching for a wife who could secure his small principality's future and elevate its reputation. Fate, or perhaps publicity, intervened. Paris Match arranged a photo shoot at the prince's palace. Grace, ever punctual, arrived in a floral dress. The palace electricity had failed, and she waited in near darkness among the scent of roses and sea salt. Then Rainier entered, charming, reserved, amused by the unexpected simplicity of the moment. Photographs from that day would later look prophetic. The poised Hollywood goddess beside the shy European prince, two worlds curiously aligning. Over the next months, letters traveled between Monaco and Philadelphia, written in formal tones that slowly softened. By Christmas, the engagement was announced. America rejoiced. A real princess born from Hollywood dreams. Newspapers called it the wedding of the century. In April 1956, the world watched as Grace Kelly became Her Serene Highness Princess Grace of Monaco. Her wedding gown, silk, lace, and pearl, remains one of fashion's sacred relics. Her veil stretched longer than the aisle itself, her face radiant yet composed. Behind that composure, there was trembling. She was leaving her craft, her country, and her independence, trading scripts for ceremony, directors for diplomats. "I may be Princess Grace now," she later said softly, "but to those who knew me, I'm still just Grace." Hollywood wept, but it understood. In a way, the transformation was her greatest role, the actress who vanished into the fairy tale she once portrayed. Monaco, though picturesque, was not the paradise it appeared to be. It was small, just 2 square kilometers, and steeped in centuries of tradition. Its ruler, though affectionate, was cautious and proud. Grace found herself surrounded by courtiers, etiquette, and scrutiny. Every gesture mattered. Every smile was a headline. She spoke of missing the spontaneity of film sets, the laughter of crews, the simple joy of creation. She once confided to a friend, "In Hollywood, I played parts. Here, I play a part I can never leave." Motherhood brought her moments of joy. Caroline in 1957, Albert in 1958, and Stephanie in 1965. She adored her children and built her life around them, balancing duty with affection. But creative hunger never left her. Hitchcock wrote to her in 1962, offering her a comeback role in Marnie. The idea of Grace Kelly returning to the screen set Hollywood buzzing. Yet Monaco's citizens were divided. A princess in psychological thrillers was unbecoming of the crown. Under political and public pressure, she declined. It was the closing of a door she had quietly hoped would stay open. From then on, her performances would be confined to charity galas, state visits, and carefully curated appearances. Still, she found new forms of artistry, photography, poetry, and a passion for nurturing young artists through her foundation. She became Monaco's cultural ambassador, its soft power incarnate. The glamour never left her, but the freedom had. Behind the marble and the smiles, Grace's life was less serene than the tabloids imagined. Her marriage, while respectful, bore the weight of expectation and difference. Rainier was often consumed by politics and governance. Grace, restless and sensitive, longed for creative air. Friends who visited spoke of a loneliness hidden beneath perfection, a woman adored by the world, but unseen in her own palace. She had built an identity on grace and control, and both had become her prison. By the late 1970s, her children had grown. Her film career was a fading memory, and Monaco's spotlight had shifted to the next generation of celebrities. Grace began returning to her first loves, reading poetry, composing small stage pieces, writing reflections on art and womanhood. There was a certain melancholy in her, a quiet awareness that the girl who dreamed of acting had lived two fairy tales, but neither had a simple ending. "I never stopped being an actress," she once said. "I just learned to play myself." In September 1982, Grace and her youngest daughter Stephanie spent the weekend at their country estate in Rock Eagle, a place of flowers and quiet hills above the Mediterranean. Grace was preparing to return to Monaco the next morning. She packed her car herself, a light green Rover 3500. Witnesses later recalled seeing the car moving slowly along the mountain road, the Corniche d'Or, its curves sharp and steep. Moments later, it veered off the edge and tumbled down the hillside. Grace was taken to a hospital in Monaco, unconscious but alive. Doctors fought to save her, but the injuries were too severe. She passed away the next evening at just 52 years old. Princess Stephanie survived with minor injuries and a lifetime of whispers. News of the tragedy spread like wildfire. In Hollywood, theaters dimmed their lights. In Monaco, church bells tolled through the night. Even Alfred Hitchcock, weakened by illness, reportedly turned away from reporters in tears. The world had lost not just a princess, but a symbol of poise, mystery, and cinematic grace that could never be recreated. More than 40 years later, Grace Kelly remains an enigma, frozen in time, flawless, and forever unreachable. Her life is often remembered in fragments: the golden hair under studio lights, the wedding gown, the tragic car crash. But her legacy runs deeper. Grace changed the way the world saw elegance, not as vanity, but as discipline. She taught that beauty could be both soft and strong, that silence could speak louder than words. Her performances, especially in Hitchcock's films, continued to inspire generations of actors and filmmakers. She embodied what the director called the woman of icy fire, the contradiction of restraint and passion. In Monaco, her philanthropic work still endures through the Princess Grace Foundation, supporting young artists and preserving her belief that creativity and compassion can coexist. To this day, tourists visit her resting place at the Cathedral of St. Nicholas, where her tombstone reads simply, Grace Patricia Kelly, Princess of Monaco, 1929 to 1982. And sometimes, when the Riviera light hits the sea just right, you can almost imagine her, a pale figure at the palace balcony, smiling at a world that still remembers her face. "Fairy tales," she once said, "can come true, but they can also fade. Still, it's worth believing in them."